This is the story of the Mosin-Nagant, and why the truth is more complex than the legend. March 1942. A converted schoolhouse in Vishniaki, a village 8 kilometers east of Moscow. Frost clings to the windows. Temperature sits at -18 degrees Celsius. Wind pushes through gaps in the doorframe, carrying the smell of wood smoke and frozen earth. Inside, 41 women sit on wooden benches. Most are between 18 and 23 years old. Former factory workers, university students, collective farm daughters. Their hair has been cut short. Their uniforms are men's sizes, too large at the shoulders, cinched at the waist with belts punched with extra holes. Each of them holds a rifle, bolt action, 5 rounds, internal magazine, iron sights on most, a 3.5 power scope on a few. The weapon weighs just under 9 pounds and stretches 48.5 inches long. It was designed in 1891, more than half a century before any of these women were born. A Mosin-Nagant model, 1891/30. At the front of the room, the school director, Nora Chegodayeva, begins the morning lecture on wind deflection at 300 meters. Outside, the war grinds on. The Wehrmacht holds territory less than 200 kilometers west. Moscow itself came under direct threat just 4 months earlier. These women are not here by accident. They are not here because the Soviet Union ran out of men, although the losses have been staggering. They are here because of a deliberate strategic decision, one built on a decade of pre-war preparation, a specific military doctrine, and a rifle that made the entire program structurally possible. This is the story of that decision, and it begins with a weapon most people dismiss as obsolete. Ask 10 people what the Mosin-Nagant was, and 9 will give you the same answer. It was the standard Soviet infantry rifle, mass-produced, cheap, simple. Forced on millions of Red Army soldiers because the Soviet Union lacked the industrial capacity to produce anything more modern. By 1945, factories had stamped out approximately 17.4 million of the model 1891/30 variant alone. Total production across all variants exceeded 37 million units. The conventional story frames this as a weakness. The Soviets couldn't retool. They couldn't innovate fast enough. While Germany fielded the semi-automatic Gewehr 43 and America deployed the M1 Garand, Soviet infantrymen were stuck with a bolt-action design from the age of cavalry charges. That narrative contains real facts. Production constraints were genuine. The rifle was inexpensive to manufacture. Soviet factories could produce Mosin-Nagants at a fraction of the time and cost required for more complex weapons. All of that is documented. But the narrative misses something fundamental. The Mosin-Nagant wasn't just a fallback option for Soviet infantry. It was deliberately selected, hand-picked, modified, and optimized for one specific role that no other rifle in any nation's inventory could have filled as effectively. A role that produced the largest deployment of female combatants in modern military history. A role that fundamentally altered how sniping would be understood for the next 80 years. The Soviet Women's Sniper Program. Over 2,000 women trained and deployed between 1942 and 1945, armed almost exclusively with the Mosin-Nagant, and the rifle's supposed limitations were precisely what made the program work. If you're finding this interesting, hit subscribe. More deep dives like this are coming. To understand why the Mosin-Nagant became the backbone of this program, you need to look past the specification sheet and into the engineering trade-offs that define the weapon. The rifle fired the 7.62 by 54R cartridge. A rimmed round, designed in 1891 with a high ballistic coefficient, which means the projectile maintained velocity and stability over distance better than most comparable cartridges of the era, which means a trained shooter could engage human-sized targets reliably at 400 meters and beyond, well past the effective range of submachine guns and most semi-automatic rifles fielded during the war, which means the Mosin-Nagant created a weapon system where a single well-aimed shot at distance was worth more than a dozen rounds fired in haste. The bolt action itself requires examination. Every popular history source calls it primitive, outdated, a relic. And for standard infantry combat, where suppressive fire and rate of fire matter, bolt action was a limitation. But the sniper role inverts those priorities entirely. A bolt-action mechanism requires the shooter to manually cycle each round. Chamber, aim, fire, extract, reload. Which means there is no semi-automatic cycling to shift the shooter's body position between shots. Which means the rifle stays exactly where the shooter placed it after each round is fired. Which means first shot accuracy, the only metric that matters in sniping, is maximized. Consider the recoil characteristics. The 7.62 by 54R generated roughly 2.8 meters per second squared of force at the shoulder. For a full-sized male infantryman weighing 80 kilograms, this was uncomfortable but manageable during sustained fire. For the women entering the sniper program, who averaged 55 to 60 kilograms, repeated recoil absorption would have been a genuine physical challenge in a rapid-fire weapon. But snipers don't fire rapidly, they fire once. From a prone braced position, with the rifle's 48.5-inch length providing a stable platform against the ground. In that configuration, recoil becomes a non-issue, absorbed by the earth itself. The sniper variant carried one additional modification that transformed its capability. A PU scope, 3.5 power, fixed focus, mounted above the chamber on a side rail. The bolt handle was turned down and extended to clear the scope housing. This modification cost almost nothing in manufacturing terms. Selected rifles, chosen for accuracy during factory testing, received the scope mount, a longer bolt handle, and a lightened trigger pull. No fundamental redesign was required. The same production line that manufactured standard infantry rifles could produce sniper variants with minimal additional tooling. And then something changed. The scope didn't just improve accuracy, it changed the entire engagement paradigm. A skilled shooter with iron sights could reliably hit targets at 200 to 300 meters. With the PU scope, effective engagement range extended to 500 meters and beyond. At those distances, the shooter operated in a world of patience and geometry, not reflexes and volume. The rifle's weight, its length, its slow rate of fire, all the characteristics that made it clumsy for infantry work, became structural advantages for precision shooting. There is another dimension to the Mosin-Nagant's cold weather performance that deserves attention. Soviet armorers used lubricants almost as thin as water on the bolt and action components. German weapons, by contrast, relied on heavier greases that froze solid below -20 degrees Celsius. The Mosin-Nagant's deliberately loose manufacturing tolerances, often criticized as evidence of Soviet backwardness, allowed the action to cycle even when ice crystals formed inside the receiver. Tight tolerances seize in extreme cold. Loose tolerances, forgive it. What looked like poor craftsmanship was, for winter warfare, superior engineering philosophy. The Finns proved this from the opposite side of the battlefield. During the Winter War of 1939 to 1940, Finnish soldiers used their own modified Mosin-Nagant variants against the Soviets. The most famous Finnish sniper in history, Simo Häyhä, was credited with over 500 kills using a Finnish M28/30 derivative. He never used a scope. In interviews before his death, Häyhä explained that the Soviet-designed scope mount forced the shooter to raise his head too high, increasing the chance of detection. He preferred iron sights, the fundamental configuration of the Mosin-Nagant platform. The rifle's inherent accuracy at range made optics optional for a shooter of sufficient skill. One more specification matters here, and other channels rarely discuss it. The Mosin-Nagant's magazine was internal, loaded via stripper clips. No detachable box magazine to rattle, drop, or lose. In the absolute silence required for sniper operations, where a single metallic click could reveal a position and end a life, that simplicity was worth more than any technological sophistication Germany or America could offer. The Central Women's School of Sniper Training opened in Vyshniaki in March 1942. This was not improvisation. This was the culmination of a decade of deliberate preparation. Beginning in the early 1930s, under Marshal Kliment Voroshilov's oversight, the Soviet Union had established a nationwide network of civilian shooting clubs. Thousands of young women participated alongside men through these clubs and through Komsomol youth organizations. They earned Voroshilov sharpshooter badges. They competed in regional matches. They received basic military training integrated into the Communist Party's vision of universal readiness. When Operation Barbarossa shattered the Red Army in June 1941, killing and capturing millions of soldiers in the first months. Those pre-war marksmanship programs became a strategic reserve that no other nation on Earth possessed. Britain had women in support roles. America restricted women to auxiliary services. Germany excluded women from combat entirely. Only the Soviet Union had both the ideological framework and the practical training infrastructure to deploy women as frontline killers. The school recruited women aged 18 to 26, physically fit, with at least 7 years of education. Training lasted several months. Graduates deployed in pairs, one shooter, one spotter, to frontline units across the Eastern Front. They carried a Mosin-Nagant sniper rifle with ammunition, bandages, a shovel, a mess kit, and 2 grenades. The second grenade was not for the enemy. It was for themselves, a final measure to prevent capture. As the war continued, some women replaced that grenade with a captured German pistol. The last bullet was always reserved. Graduates were trained to harass and eliminate targets from distance. They operated independently, leaving camp before dawn and returning after dark. They were ordered never to participate in frontal assaults and never to keep personal diaries that might provide intelligence if captured. The results were documented across hundreds of engagements on the Eastern Front. Lyudmila Pavlichenko volunteered for the Red Army on June 22, 1941, the day Germany invaded. She was 24 years old, a history student at Kiev University who had trained at a civilian sniping school for 6 months. At the Odessa recruiting office, the registrar tried to assign her as a nurse. She refused, produced her marksman certificates and Voroshilov badge, and demanded infantry assignment. Assigned to the 25th Rifle Division's sniper unit, she initially received no rifle at all, only a single RGD-33 fragmentation grenade. When a fellow soldier was killed by a headshot near her position, the wounded man beside him handed Pavlichenko his Mosin-Nagant. Her combat career began the following day, when she eliminated 2 Romanian soldiers, digging in 300 meters from her position. Over 12 months of continuous frontline service at the sieges of Odessa and Sevastopol, Pavlichenko recorded 309 confirmed kills. 36 of those were enemy snipers engaged in counter-sniper duels. Her tactics exploited every characteristic of the Mosin-Nagant. She used thunderstorms and artillery barrages to mask the sound of her rifle. She never fired from the same position twice. She tied cloth strips to bushes in exposed areas, creating movement that distracted enemy observers scanning for her. She placed mannequins dressed as soldiers in tempting positions, drawing opposing snipers into revealing themselves so she could engage from a concealed angle. Wounded 4 times, including shrapnel to the face from a mortar round. In June 1942, Pavlichenko was evacuated by submarine from Sevastopol on orders from Soviet High Command. She was too valuable to lose. She became the first Soviet citizen welcomed at the White House, meeting President Franklin Roosevelt and touring the United States with First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt to build support for a second front in Europe. American reporters asked her about makeup and whether women on the front could wear skirts. She was asked if her uniform made her look fat. Pavlichenko, who had killed more enemy soldiers than most American battalions encountered in a year, responded with characteristic bluntness. She wanted to kill fascists, not discuss fashion. Rosa Shanina, the young woman from the Vishniaki schoolhouse, earned a different kind of reputation. Nicknamed the unseen terror of East Prussia, she specialized in doublets, 2 precisely aimed shots at separate targets in rapid succession, a technique that demanded absolute mastery of the Mosin-Nagant's bolt cycle. Her 75 confirmed kills included 12 enemy snipers. She carried a diary despite explicit orders against it, and that diary became one of the most important primary documents of the female sniper experience. Shanina died in January 1945 at age 20, leading a charge she was never supposed to join during fighting in East Prussia. She had ignored orders before. The last time cost her life. Klavdia Kalugina entered sniper school at 17, among the youngest women accepted. She finished the war with 257 confirmed kills. Nina Lobkovskaya commanded a platoon of female snipers from Stalingrad to Berlin, fighting through some of the most savage urban combat of the entire war. And then there were Maria Polivanova and Natalia Kovshova, best friends who trained together and deployed as a sniper spotter team. In August 1942, near Novgorod, their unit was overrun during a German assault. Wounded and out of ammunition, with German soldiers closing in on their trench, the two women waited until the enemy was within arm's reach. Then they detonated their grenades. Both died. Both were posthumously awarded the Hero of the Soviet Union. They were 22 and 20 years old. The psychological impact on German forces was documented in field reports. German soldiers grew increasingly unnerved by the knowledge that death could arrive silently from a concealed position held by a woman they would never see. Counter-sniper operations consumed resources and attention disproportionate to the number of shooters deployed. A single sniper pair, armed with one Mosin-Nagant, could pin down an entire company for hours, forcing dozens of soldiers into cover while disrupting movement, supply runs, and officer communication. The rifle's report echoed across terrain in ways that made locating the shooter extremely difficult, especially when the sniper changed positions after every shot. Soviet sniper doctrine formalized these tactics into what became known as the Sixes. 3 sniper teams, 6 individuals total, would occupy overlapping positions covering a wide engagement zone. When one team fired, the others remained silent, watching for enemy reaction. If counter-snipers revealed themselves by responding to the first shot, the silent teams engaged. It was lethal geometry, practiced across the frozen ruins of Stalingrad, the forests of Belarus, and the rubble of Berlin. The weapon at the center of every calculation was the same: the Mosin-Nagant. These were not isolated heroes. They were products of a system, and the system's foundation was a rifle that was simple enough for rapid training, accurate enough for precision killing at distance, reliable enough for -40-degree temperatures, and available in sufficient quantity to arm an entirely new category of combatant without disrupting existing infantry supply chains. This is where it gets complicated. The Soviet Union attempted to modernize its sniper program with the SVT-40 semi-automatic rifle. The weapon fired the identical 7.62 by 54R cartridge. It offered a detachable 10-round box magazine, double the Mosin-Nagant's capacity. On paper, the upgrade should have been obvious. In the field, the SVT-40 failed as a sniper platform. Its semi-automatic gas system introduced vibrations that degraded first-shot accuracy at long range. The muzzle flash from its gas port could betray a sniper's position in low-light conditions. Its mechanical complexity meant more parts that could fail, more maintenance required, and more training time before a shooter could trust the weapon completely. Some elite snipers received the SVT-40. Most returned to the Mosin-Nagant within weeks. The implications were clear. The most technologically advanced option was not the most effective option. German snipers on the Eastern Front reached a similar conclusion from the opposite direction. According to wartime accounts, including testimony from the Austrian sniper Joseph Allerberger, some German marksmen preferred captured Mosin-Nagants to their own Kar-98K rifles. The reason was environmental. In temperatures below -20 °F, the Kar-98K's tighter manufacturing tolerances caused the bolt to seize. German lubricants, thicker than Soviet equivalents, froze solid. Ammunition could not be loaded from stripper clips. The bolt required excessive force to close and lock. The Mosin-Nagant, designed from the beginning for Russian winters, used deliberately loose tolerances and thin lubricants that remained functional in extreme cold. The rifle that looked crude on a specification comparison performed better when conditions deteriorated past the point where precision engineering could cope. What other channels don't discuss is this: the loose tolerances that made the Mosin-Nagant functional in extreme cold also introduced accuracy variation between individual rifles. Soviet armorers solved this by hand-selecting rifles for the sniper program. Every sniper Mosin-Nagant was factory tested for accuracy before receiving scope mounts. Rifles that didn't meet the threshold went to standard infantry units. Rifles that exceeded it became precision instruments. The manufacturing process was crude in aggregate. Individually selected rifles could achieve accuracy that rivaled purpose-built precision weapons. Now, honesty demands context. Not every female sniper was successful. Not every engagement followed doctrine. Of roughly 2,000 women trained as snipers, approximately 500 survived the war. That is a 75% casualty rate, staggering by any measure. Soviet propaganda unquestionably inflated some individual kill counts for morale purposes. Modern historians apply the same skepticism to Soviet sniper tallies that they apply to German aerial victory claims. Numbers should be understood as approximate, not precise. The overclaiming does not invalidate the achievement. Even conservative estimates confirm that Soviet female snipers eliminated thousands of Axis soldiers across the Eastern Front between 1942 and 1945. 6 women snipers earned the title of Hero of the Soviet Union 45. 6 women snipers earned the Hero of the Soviet Union decoration, equivalent to the American Medal of Honor. 5 of those 6 were killed in action. The uncomfortable fact remains. No other nation attempted anything comparable. Not because the concept was unknown. British intelligence was fully aware of the Soviet sniper program. American military observers documented it. The capability existed in theory for any nation with a pre-war shooting culture. The difference was systemic. Only the Soviet Union combined the ideological willingness to deploy women in direct combat, the pre-war infrastructure of marksmanship training, and a rifle whose specific characteristics, simplicity, cold weather reliability, accuracy potential, and sheer numerical availability made large-scale sniper deployment logistically possible without disrupting infantry supply chains. Remove any one of those 3 elements and the program collapses. Remove the ideology and women never reach the front. Remove the training infrastructure and there aren't enough qualified shooters. Remove the Mosin-Nagant and there is no weapon available in sufficient numbers that meets all operational requirements simultaneously. The rifle wasn't incidental to the program. It was structural, the foundation without which nothing else could have been built. March 1942. Vishniaki, frost on the windows. 41 women on wooden benches, a rifle in every pair of hands. One of those women, Rosa Shanina, 20 years old. Strawberry blonde hair cut short, blue eyes focused on the weapon in her lap, does not yet know what is coming. She does not know about the 75 kills. She does not know about the diary she will keep against orders, the document that will outlive her by 80 years and counting. She does not know about East Prussia, about the charge, about the cold morning in January 1945, when she will die doing something she was explicitly told not to do. What she knows is the weight of the Mosin-Nagant against her shoulder, the resistance of the bolt under frozen fingers, the sharp, flat crack of the 7.62 round, leaving the barrel at 805 meters per second, crossing distance faster than sound, arriving before the target hears anything at all. The Mosin-Nagant did not just arm the Soviet infantry. It armed a transformation in who could fight, how wars could be waged, and what a single well-placed shot from an 1891 design could mean against the most technologically advanced military in Europe. Not by accident, not by desperation, by design. That is the lesson of the Mosin-Nagant, and that is why, 80 years later, the rifle everyone calls obsolete remains the most consequential weapon most people have never properly understood. Drop a comment if you think the sniper role deserves its own series.